I was on the floor of the Magnolia Ballroom in Charleston, my white maternity dress soaking through, when I understood for the first time that the silence I had lived in my whole life was about to become the loudest thing in that room. I'm deaf. I have been since I was 4 years old. So when my father shoved my wheelchair, yes, that day I needed both, the chair for my legs and my hands for the world. When he shoved it sideways in front of 300 wedding guests, I didn't hear the gasp go through the crowd. I felt it. I felt the floor shudder. I felt the warm rush that meant my daughter was coming a month too soon. My father, Gerald, stood over me with his face purple with rage because I had just refused, in front of every important person in the Low Country, to sign my grandmother's estate over to my perfect younger sister on her wedding day. He thought a deaf woman couldn't make a sound loud enough to matter. He had no idea that every word he'd hissed at me for the last 10 minutes was already saved, captioned, and time-stamped on a server 3 states away. And he had no idea that my husband, Daniel, had just walked back through the garden doors. I'm healing now. Telling this story still takes everything I have. So before I go on, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Just knowing you're out there means more than you know. Type it below. My name is Maya. If you saw me wheeling along the cobblestones of downtown Charleston, you'd see a woman who looks like she has it all figured out. I run a successful branding studio from my laptop. I have a husband who adores me and a baby on the way. I read lips, I sign, I type faster than most people talk. But look closer, past the polished surface, and you'd see the hearing aids that never gave me more than shapes of sound, and the chair I started using 2 years ago when a car accident took the strength in my legs. 2 things the world wasn't built for, stacked on top of each other. I grew up believing what they tell every Southern child, that blood is thicker than water, that family protects you, that home is a soft place to land. But in my father's house, I wasn't a daughter. I was a flaw in the family portrait. Gerald was a man who lived and died by appearances. A senior partner at a downtown law firm, a fixture at the yacht club, a man who needed everything around him to look expensive and effortless, a deaf daughter who needed interpreters, special schools, and all that fuss did not fit the picture he wanted to hang on the wall. So I learned to disappear. I learned to read the room with my eyes because no one ever bothered to face me when they spoke. I learned that if I made myself small enough, the storms would pass over me. My sister, Vanessa, was the picture. 2 years younger, beautiful, hearing, a debutante with a 1,000-watt smile. When Vanessa wanted cotillion riding lessons, a year abroad in Paris, the money appeared like magic. When I needed a new interpreter for school, suddenly money was tight, and I should learn to manage. The one person who ever truly faced me, who looked into my eyes and waited for me to answer, was my grandmother, Eleanor. Nana learned to sign for me when I was 5. She was the only one. She would sit with me for hours on her porch on Sullivan's Island, our hands moving in the salt air, and she'd tell me I had the sharpest mind in the whole family. She knew exactly what her son was. So when Nana passed 3 years ago, she did something that turned my father's blood to ice. She skipped over Gerald entirely. She left her historic island cottage, worth nearly $500,000, and a $100,000 trust directly to me. My father stood in my living room and signed to me in the clumsy, angry way he'd never bothered to learn properly. A girl who can't hear and can't walk doesn't need a beach house. He told me it belonged to Vanessa. He told me I was selfish. 5 years ago, I met Daniel. Daniel learned to sign before our 3rd date. Not because I asked him to, because he wanted to meet me where I lived. He never spoke to my interpreter when he should have been speaking to me. He never raised his voice as if volume could break through deafness. He looked at me, at my humor, my work, my whole self, and he stayed. When we found out we were having a girl, Daniel pressed his hands to my belly every night and signed stories to her through my skin. We were going to raise her in Nana's cottage with the sea oats and the salt wind. I thought I had finally escaped, but greed doesn't respect distance. For 2 years after the will was read, my mother, Lorraine, texted me every week. Vanessa's wedding was going to be the event of the season. Gerald had overextended. The family's reputation was on the line, and I was the only one who could keep us from embarrassment. I was so starved for 1 ounce of approval from a father who had never once faced me when he spoke that I let them wear me down. Over those 2 years, I quietly transferred $60,000 from Nana's trust into the wedding, into Vanessa's down payment, into Gerald's temporary gaps. Every transfer, I told myself I was buying peace. I was bleeding my own daughter's future dry for people who never once learned to say my name with their hands. The wedding was held at the Magnolia Ballroom, the grandest venue in the city. 300 guests, senators, judges, half the partners at my father's firm, a live string quartet I would only ever feel through the floor. I was 8 months pregnant. My back was screaming, my ankles were swollen, and the June heat made everything worse. Daniel had been at my side all afternoon, interpreting, adjusting my cushions, bringing me water. Then I asked him to run out to the car for my orthopedic brace. 5 minutes, he signed, kissing my forehead. Don't move. The moment he stepped out, I felt the floor change, vibrations crossing the parquet toward me, heavy, fast. I turned my chair, and there they were. My father, my sister in her wedding gown, my mother a few feet behind, champagne in hand. Gerald didn't pull me aside. He stood in the open, feet from his colleagues, and dropped a thick folder onto my lap. I read the top line, a quitclaim deed, transferring Nana's cottage to Vanessa for $1. I signed back, fast and sharp. No, we are raising our daughter in that house. Vanessa leaned down, and because I read lips, I caught every poisonous word. You can't even hear your own baby cry. You can't walk her down the beach. Why does someone like you need a house like that? I looked for my mother. Our eyes met for half a second. Then Lorraine deliberately turned her back and clinked her glass against a neighbor's. Gerald's hands flew at me, ugly and loud in the air. You will sign it. You will not humiliate me today. I grabbed my armrest, shielding my belly, and I did something I almost never do in public. I used my voice. The voice I can't hear. The one that comes out flat and strange. I forced out one word so loud the dancers stopped. No. And that flat, broken shout, 300 heads turning toward us, shattered my father's composure completely. In a blind, unhinged second, he grabbed the left wheel of my chair and flipped it. The world tilted. The floor came up. My body, my daughter, slammed onto the hard parquet, white light behind my eyes, and then the warm rush soaking through white silk, pooling on the polished wood. My water had broken a month early. I lay on my side, one cheek against the cold floor, watching the wheels of my overturned chair spin in the air. The first contraction crushed through my back like a fist. I looked up. Gerald wasn't kneeling to help his grandchild. He was scanning the faces of his partners, his clients, the judges, watching his reputation crack in real time. Vanessa stood frozen in her gown, hands over her mouth. Lorraine was already crying the tears of a woman whose party was ruined, not a mother whose daughter was bleeding. No one reached for me. And in that exact moment, the last thread of the little deaf girl who just wanted her father to face her, it snapped. The fear in my chest went cold and clear. Because here is what my family never understood about me. A deaf woman doesn't rely on sound. I rely on everything else. For 2 years, for accessibility, because I cannot hear what people say behind my back, I had run a live captioning app on my phone at every family gathering. It listened, transcribed every word into text, and saved every transcript automatically to the cloud, time-stamped the moment it was created. It had been running in my handbag the entire time. Every word Gerald hissed, every cruel thing Vanessa said about my body and my baby, the metallic crash. It was all already text, already saved, already 3 states away on a server beyond his reach. I didn't waste my breath. I dragged my arm to my bag, pulled my phone, and with a shaking thumb, I opened the transcript and the SOS shortcut Daniel and I had set up for my high-risk pregnancy. One tap to dial 911, broadcast my location, and flag a medical and safety emergency. The screen flashed red. I laid my head back down and let the agony take me, holding that phone like a blade. The garden doors flew open. I didn't hear them, but I felt the rush of air and saw the panic break across the crowd. Daniel. He crossed that ballroom in seconds, dropped to his knees, his hands shaking too hard to sign properly. Maya, Maya. What happened? I grabbed his sleeve. He flipped my chair. My water broke. I watched Daniel's face change into something I had never seen, a cold, towering fury. He stood, putting his whole body between me and them. Gerald's mouth was moving fast, defensive. I read it off his lips. An accident. The heat, she got dizzy. She fell on her own lawn. Then the walls flashed red and blue. Because my phone had broadcast a medical and domestic emergency, paramedics and 2 Charleston officers came straight through the ballroom, scattering the wedding guests in their tuxedos and gowns. 4 medics swarmed me, collar on my neck, hands on my belly. The string quartet had stopped. 300 of the most important people in the Low Country stood in absolute stillness, watching the most powerful family in the room become a crime scene. As they lifted me onto the gurney, I caught the arm of the lead officer. I can't always trust my own voice, so I did what I do best. I held up my phone and showed her the screen, the transcript, every line. Vanessa, you can't even walk her down the beach. Gerald, you ungrateful little... Sign it. Loud crash. Screaming. Time-stamped. Minutes old. An interpreter on the medical team signed the officer's words back to me so I'd understand. The officer read the transcript. She looked up at Gerald, and she reached for her cuffs. I will never hear the click of handcuffs, but I will never forget the way my father's whole body went rigid as steel closed around his wrists in the middle of his daughter's wedding, in front of every person whose opinion he had ever cared about. As they wheeled me out, I saw Lorraine collapse against a pillar, sobbing. Not for me, for the camera's already filming. I saw Vanessa standing alone in her gown in the wreckage of her perfect day, and I saw my father being walked through the crowd in cuffs, his life ending in the silence I had lived in all along. The lights of MUSC's delivery floor were a clean, bright world away from that ballroom. For 11 hours, my body fought a premature, high-risk labor. Daniel never let go of my hand. He signed every update from every doctor straight into my palm, so I was never, for 1 second, locked out of my own daughter's birth. At 3:48 in the morning, I felt it before I saw it. The change in the room, the bodies relaxing, Daniel's face breaking open. They laid her on my chest. My daughter, Eleanor after my grandmother, early, tiny, and perfect. I couldn't hear her first cry, but I felt it. I felt it move through her body into mine, the most beautiful thing I have ever not heard. The law moved fast. The transcripts, the 911 broadcast, the medical reports, 300 witnesses. Within days, the Charleston stations ran the story. Gerald was charged with aggravated assault on a pregnant woman causing serious bodily injury. 6 months later, he was sentenced to 18 years. The senior partner, the yacht club man, gone. Vanessa's marriage didn't survive the scandal. Her new husband's family quietly stepped away. Lorraine and Vanessa sold what they had to cover the legal bills and ended up in a small rented place across the river, isolated, the invitations all dried up. Today I sit on the porch of Nana's cottage on Sullivan's Island. The salt wind moves through the sea oats. Daniel is on the sand, holding Eleanor's hands while she takes her first wobbling steps toward the water. I watch their hands move. He's already teaching her to sign. My family thought my silence made me weak. They never understood that I had simply learned my whole life to keep the receipts the world tried to hide from me. I lost a father who never once faced me when he spoke. I gained a husband, a daughter, and a quiet that is finally peaceful. Do you think the sentence fit the crime, or would you have done something differently? Tell me below. And if this story moved you, subscribe and tap the bell. There's a new one every day. Thank you for listening.